All right, let's dive in. We've had some requests to explore how to experience non-duality and, maybe finally break free from suffering.
Ah, the age-old
Yeah,
question.
who doesn't want that, right? So, to really get to the heart of it, we're going straight to the source, the Vedanta Sutras.
Oh, excellent choice. A foundational text from the Vedanta school of Hindu philosophy.
Definitely some dense stuff,
Yay.
but
Absolutely.
but we're here to unpack it and find those golden nuggets for you. And luckily, we've got an expert to help guide us through it.
Well, I'm excited to dive in. What I love about the Vedanta Sutras is that it doesn't just throw out mystical ideas. I mean,
Sure.
it really digs deep into the nature of reality, using logic and debate to explore this path to liberation.
Yeah, I was struck by how the text tackles the idea of escaping samsara,
Hmm.
that endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
Yeah.
It's like you're on this cosmic treadmill just going nowhere.
Exactly. And it's that cycle that the text identifies as the root of suffering. And it says, true freedom, true liberation comes from knowledge, specifically knowledge of Brahman.
Okay, so Brahman, for anyone who's not familiar, think of it as the ultimate reality.
Right, the essence behind everything.
So wait, are you saying good deeds, all those karma points we try to rack up,
Yeah,
they're not the answer?
that's where it gets really interesting. The Vedanta Sutras actually draws a clear distinction between actions, what it calls karmakcha, and knowledge, which it calls jnanakat.
Okay.
And it says even those good deeds, while important, ultimately lead you right back into that cycle of samsara.
So it's like what, earning a temporary upgrade on the cosmic treadmill?
You could see it that way, yeah. But it's knowledge that truly breaks the cycle.
So hold on, you're saying even good deeds aren't enough.
Hmm.
Okay. So what kind of knowledge are we talking about here? What kind of knowledge breaks us free?
Well, there are two types of knowledge within Janakat.
Okay.
There's knowledge of what we call the lower Brahman, which is kind of tied to the world and its qualities.
Mhm.
But then there's knowledge of the higher Brahman, and that transcends all of that.
Oh,
That higher knowledge, that's the express lane to liberation.
okay. I'm intrigued. But how do you even begin to grasp something beyond qualities? It's a tough concept for sure.
Well, the text uses this incredibly powerful phrase, that art thou.
Okay.
Basically, it's saying your individual soul, the Atman, it's one with that highest Brahman.
Hmm.
Imagine realizing that you're not separate from this infinite, all-encompassing reality, like a drop of water realizing it's part of the ocean.
That art thou.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's some heavy stuff. But what does realizing that even mean for how we live our lives? How does that translate into, everyday experience?
Well, if we zoom out a bit, that art thou, it shatters the illusion of separateness. You start to see through the ego
Yeah.
and recognize this fundamental non-duality, that you're one with everything. And that's the key to unlocking freedom from suffering.
It sounds almost too simple. But I can see how that realization, if you really embodied it, would completely turn your whole world upside down.
Absolutely. It changes everything from how you perceive the world to how you experience your very place in it.
One thing that really stood out to me as I was reading through the Vedanta Sutras is just how much of the text is actually dedicated to debating whether certain Vedic passages refer to Brahman or not. It's like this philosophical detective story trying to decipher these ancient clues.
That's a very sharp observation, and it really shows how tricky it can be to try to define Brahman. It's not something easily pinned down.
Yeah.
And so the Vedanta Sutras approaches this from different angles, analyzing various descriptions found in the Vedas. Like,
Right.
for instance, there's a discussion about this golden person that's seen within the sun and within the eye.
Right.
Is that the individual soul, or is that Brahman? What about the ether that all beings are said to originate from?
Yeah.
What is the nature of prana, the breath and light, as described in the Upanishads?
There was one example that really grabbed me. I think it was the Adhikarat the Sixth. It's where they're debating whether the Anandamaya, this being of bliss, is just a soul, or if it's Brahman itself.
Yeah.
And even the commentators can't agree.
It's a fantastic example of how the Vedanta Sutras really pushes you to think critically. There's no easy answer, just these different interpretations.
Yeah.
It highlights the complexity of trying to understand Brahman, and it invites you to dig deeper, question, and explore these concepts for yourself.
It's like the text itself is saying, hey, don't just take my word for it. Go on your own adventure of discovery.
Exactly. It's like a map, but you have to walk the path yourself to truly understand the territory.
Okay, so speaking of the path, the text mentions that practices like meditation and sacrificial works can help us reach liberation. And it even suggests that sacrifices without understanding their deeper meaning still contribute. I mean, that's pretty wild.
Right. It's a bit counterintuitive. But the idea is that while actions alone won't fully liberate you, the Vedanta Sutras suggests they purify the mind. They can kind of set the stage for that deeper knowledge to take root.
Okay.
So they're like stepping stones.
Right.
Helpful, but not the destination. Ultimately, it's that knowledge of Brahman that destroys the ignorance, the avidya that binds us to samsara.
So, okay, actions are like tilling the soil before planting a seed.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about meditation? Does the text have specific instructions?
It does. It advises sitting, picking a quiet place, and focusing until death.
Whoa.
Sounds intense, right?
Right.
But the idea is these practices build the focus needed to see through all those illusions and truly realize your true nature.
I did read somewhere, though, that even there's debate about whether those rules apply to every type of meditation.
Oh, absolutely. Again, no simple answers here. The Vedanta Sutras offers these multiple perspectives, acknowledging that the path to liberation is very personal. It's about finding what resonates with your own longing for freedom.
Yeah, makes sense. This kind of leads to another point, which is how the text itself actually acknowledges that it's tough to find, like, one clear-cut interpretation of the Upanishads. It's like the text itself is saying, hey, this is hard stuff.
Well, and the fascinating part is that this difficulty, it's not seen as a flaw. You see, the Upanishads were composed during this time of immense change, where thinkers weren't necessarily limited by rigid rules or doctrines.
That reminds me of how the text describes these legendary figures, getting teachings from the most unexpected sources, fathers, kings, even bulls and birds.
It really shows that the knowledge of Brahman, that spark of non-duality, isn't limited to one particular group or tradition.
Yeah.
It's a universal possibility, open to anyone who truly seeks it.
It makes you realize that the search for truth can take many forms. And sometimes those deepest insights, they come from the most surprising places.
Indeed. The Vedanta Sutras encourages us to be open to all sources of wisdom, those whispers of truth that echo throughout the universe.
So one of the biggest hurdles to experiencing this non-duality that the text mentions is adhyasa, or superimposition. Can you break that down for us a little bit?
Sure. Ataisa, basically, it's mistaking yourself, the subject, with the non-self, the object. It's what makes you say, that's me or that's mine about external things, like, mistaking a rope for a snake in the dark.
Oh.
It's that misperception.
So it's like we're seeing ourselves as separate from the world when deep down we're not.
Exactly. The text uses this example of someone mistaking mother of pearl for silver because of their memory, showing how adhyasa works through past experiences. We project those experiences onto the present, creating this veil that hides our true nature.
So how do we get past that superimposition? How do we see clearly?
The Vedanta Sutras really highlights the importance of learning to distinguish between the self and the non-self. It involves self-inquiry, questioning your assumptions, and really examining your experience. And with consistent self-reflection and contemplation, you can start to see through the illusions of atisa and wake up to your true, non-dual nature.
Okay. This is all making a lot of sense. But there's also this big chunk of the text dedicated to arguing against other philosophical schools, like Sakya and Vaishika.
Yeah.
Why is that such a focus?
It really highlights just how lively the intellectual scene was in Indian philosophy. These schools were constantly debating, each trying to prove their ideas using scriptures and logic. And the Vedanta Sutras dives right into that, systematically breaking down opposing views to solidify its argument for Brahman as that sole reality.
So it's like a philosophical battle royale.
You could say that, yeah.
What were some of the main arguments against, like, these other schools?
Well, take Sakya, for example. They believe that Pridvana, which is kind of like this primordial matter, is the root cause of the world. And the Vedanta Sutras challenges this by asking, how can something non-intelligent create intelligence? It's like expecting a rock to suddenly start composing poetry.
What about Vaishika?
They believe in atoms as the building blocks of reality.
Okay.
And the Vedanta Sutras questions their permanence and divisibility. If atoms are the ultimate building blocks, how can they change and break down? And if they're truly indivisible, how do they join up to create all the different things we see? So the text uses these arguments, and many more, to really dismantle these opposing views.
So it's like watching a masterclass in philosophical debate. So by refuting these other viewpoints, the Vedanta Sutras is sort of strengthening its own case for Brahman as this ultimate reality and for that path to breaking free from suffering.
Exactly. It clears the path of those opposing viewpoints, paving the way for its own vision of non-duality and that route to freedom.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive so far, and we've only just begun. We'll continue our exploration of the Vedanta Sutras in Part 2, where we'll keep uncovering the secrets of non-duality and the path to freedom from suffering.
I'm looking forward to it. Welcome back to our exploration of the Vedanta Sutras.
I'm still thinking about those arguments against other philosophies. It really shows how the text is, really going all in on establishing Brahman as this foundation
Right.
for everything.
Yeah, and that foundation is crucial because from there, the text really explores how we can actually break free from suffering.
And let's be real, who doesn't want freedom from suffering, right? But the Vedanta Sutras isn't offering, any quick fixes here.
Right. Yeah.
It's upfront about the challenges involved.
Yeah, liberation is not easy.
Right.
It takes real effort,
Yeah.
dedicated practice, and a willingness to actually change how we think and see the world.
It's like that superimposition idea we were discussing, that Ataisa.
Mhm.
It's so sneaky. It's constantly pulling us away from experiencing our true non-dual selves.
You can think of it as this distorted lens we're seeing reality through this
Yeah.
misperception that
Yeah.
causes suffering that makes us chase after things that can never truly satisfy us.
Right.
We mistake the temporary for the eternal, the
Yeah.
limited for the boundless.
It's like we're always running after mirages in the desert, mistaking them for real oases.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And the Vedanta Sutras offers us a way out of that desert.
Right.
It points us towards this journey of self-discovery, this journey that leads to the realization that we are one with Brahman. It's about shedding those layers of illusion and awakening to the freedom within.
So it's not about becoming someone new,
No.
but uncovering who we already are deep down.
Exactly. The text really emphasizes that liberation isn't about gaining something new, but realizing what's already present. It's just hidden beneath our ignorance.
That reminds me of how the text talks about meditation, like turning inward to experience this reality directly.
Right. Meditation is key in the Vedanta tradition.
Yeah.
It cultivates the stillness and the clarity needed to truly grasp that art Bao, to experience non-dual reality beyond all the chatter of the mind.
Like training your mind to see past the surface illusions and perceive that unity behind everything.
Exactly. And that direct experience of non-duality is what ultimately liberates us from suffering.
Yeah.
Because when you see there's no separation, that you're one with the infinite, the foundation of suffering just crumbles away.
Wow, it sounds incredibly liberating.
It is.
But, the text also mentions these obstacles even with dedicated practice.
Sure.
What about that idea of arabdhakarya, those past actions that need to play out before full liberation?
It's true. The Vedanta Sutras acknowledges that we all come into this life with karmic baggage,
Yeah.
consequences from past actions that still need to be experienced.
Right, like a debt we need to repay.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
So even with that profound realization of non-duality, we still have to deal with the fallout from our past.
That's the idea. The text suggests that while knowledge of Brahman removes the root cause of suffering,
Yeah.
the momentum of those past actions, they might still need to unfold.
Okay.
It's like a spinning wheel. Even after the initial force is gone, it takes time for it to slow down and stop.
But there's hope, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even if we experience the effects of past actions, our understanding of them, our relationship to them, has fundamentally changed.
Absolutely. Realizing non-duality, it doesn't erase the past
Right.
or make us immune to life's challenges, but it completely transforms how we experience them.
Okay.
We no longer identify with that limited self
Right.
that suffers, but we rest in the awareness of our true nature as that unchanging, blissful Brahman.
It's like watching a movie.
Yeah.
Even though the characters on screen are going through all this intense drama, we know it's not real.
Right.
We can just observe it without getting all caught up in the story.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It highlights that shift in perspective that comes with non-duality.
Right.
We're no longer victims of circumstance, but the awareness in which all those experiences arise and dissolve.
And this kind of ties back to how the text spends so much time refuting those opposing philosophical views. It's like the Vedanta Sutras is saying, hey, there are other ways of looking at things, but let's test them. Let's see if they hold up.
It's not about dismissing other ideas outright,
Right.
but engaging in this rigorous debate
Yeah.
to reach a clear and solid understanding of reality.
Okay.
It's a refining process, separating the valuables from the misleading.
And in this case, the valuable insight is that knowledge of Brahman, the understanding of non-duality as the path to freedom from suffering.
Precisely. The text meticulously examines different viewpoints, dissecting their arguments,
Yeah.
revealing their flaws, like a
Mhm.
surgeon removing those obstacles
Right.
that prevent us from experiencing our true nature.
And one of the most stubborn obstacles, it seems, is that belief in a separate self.
It is.
This limited ego that's always prone to suffering.
Right. That belief is at the core of our suffering.
Yeah.
It fuels our desires, fears, attachments, aversions. It's
Good.
constantly reinforced by our senses, our thoughts, our culture.
It's like being trapped in a hall of mirrors, you know,
Yeah.
constantly mistaking those reflections for the real thing.
Right. But the Vedanta Sutras shows us how to escape that hall of mirrors.
Yeah.
It guides us towards the knowledge that shatters those illusions and reveals the truth of who we are.
That sounds like an amazing transformative journey,
It is.
but also incredibly challenging.
Absolutely.
I mean, how do we even start down that path?
Well, the text stresses the importance of finding a qualified teacher,
Okay.
someone who's walked the path and can guide us through its complexities.
Yeah.
It emphasizes dedicated study, contemplation, and meditation.
Right.
It's a journey that requires both intellectual rigor and heartfelt devotion.
So definitely not for the casual dabbler.
It's a deep commitment to awakening to the truth of our being. But the rewards are immeasurable. Freedom from suffering, lasting peace, and the realization of our full potential,
Yeah.
all within reach.
It's inspiring to see why the Vedanta Sutras has remained so influential for so long.
It is.
It offers this profound and practical path to freedom.
It's a timeless guide to liberation, a beacon of wisdom that continues to light the way for seekers throughout history.
This exploration of the Vedanta Sutras has been incredibly rich,
It has.
and I'm eager to see what else we uncover. We'll continue our deep dive in part 3, going even further into these mysteries of non-duality and the path to freedom, so don't miss it. Back again for the deep dive.
Wrapping up our exploration of the Vedanta Sutras, and I gotta say, this whole deep dive, it's really shifted my perspective. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the world through a whole new lens.
Well, it has been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
These ancient teachings, they offer such profound insights into, the nature of reality and that path to liberation. And they're just as relevant today as they were centuries ago. It keeps coming back to me. This idea that freedom from suffering, it's not about escaping the world, right?
No.
Or becoming some kind of emotionless robot.
Yeah.
It's about understanding our true nature and seeing the world differently.
You've hit on a key point there. The Vedanta Sutras, it's not about detachment or denial. It's about transformation.
Right.
It's about recognizing our connection to everything around us. We're not these separate entities, but expressions of that same underlying reality,
Right.
the Brahman we've been talking about.
So it's less about changing our external circumstances and more about an internal shift.
Exactly. The text really emphasizes that liberation comes from transforming our inner world, how we understand ourselves, our place in the grand scheme of things.
You're right.
It's about changing our perception rather than changing the world around us.
So this transformation, this shift in perspective, that's what ultimately leads to freedom from suffering.
Precisely, when we see through that illusion of separateness, when we recognize our true non-dual nature, the root of suffering just dissolves.
Yeah.
We no longer see the world as a source of threat or pain,
Right.
but as this manifestation of the same divine reality that we ourselves are a part of.
This brings us back to that core message of the Vedanta Sutras, that art thou idea.
Right.
Such a simple phrase, but with such profound implications.
It's a powerful declaration of unity.
Yeah.
This recognition that our individual soul, the Atman, is one with the ultimate reality. With Brahman, it shatters the illusion of separation and opens the door to true liberation.
I can see how embracing that realization it would completely change your experience of everything. It's like the ultimate aha moment,
It is, and it's not meant to be just an intellectual concept, something you ponder in isolation.
Right.
The Vedanta Sutras encourages us to integrate this understanding into our daily lives, to see the divine in everything, in everyone we encounter.
So it's about living this truth,
Yeah.
not just thinking about it.
Exactly, letting go of that limited, ego-driven perspective and embracing the boundless freedom that comes with recognizing our true nature.
So we've talked about Janakana, that path of knowledge, as the route to liberation. But What does it really mean to know Brahman? Can you just like read about it in a book?
That's a great question. The Vedanta Sutras acknowledges that intellectual understanding alone isn't enough.
Right.
True knowledge of Brahman is a direct experience,
Okay.
a deep intuitive knowing that goes beyond words and concepts.
So it's more of a felt sense.
Yeah.
Something you experience rather than just think about.
It's like the difference between reading about the ocean and actually diving in.
Mm-hmm.
You can study all the maps and charts you want, but you won't truly know the ocean until you feel the water.
Right.
Taste the salt,
Yeah.
experience it firsthand.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
So the path to liberation, it's less about accumulating information
Right.
and more about like transforming ourselves,
Exactly.
shifting from this limited ego to this boundless awareness.
And that transformation, that awakening to our true nature, that's the ultimate goal of the Vedanta Sutras.
Yeah.
It's the key to unlocking the freedom, the peace, the joy that are our birthright.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, and I have to say, like, I have a whole newfound appreciation for the wisdom packed into the Vedanta Sutras.
Mm-hmm.
It's a challenging text,
It is.
but also incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
It makes you want to like keep exploring these ideas,
And remember, you're not alone on this journey.
Yeah.
The Vedanta Sutras reminds us of the importance of guidance from teachers, the support of fellow seekers,
Mhm.
connecting with others who share that yearning for freedom. It can make all the difference.
That's great advice. And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring non-duality. It's a path that can lead to incredible transformation and lasting fulfillment. And as always, if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to dive into in the future, let us know.
Yeah, we're always excited to explore new depths of knowledge and share our discoveries with you.
Until next time, keep diving deep.